Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Voice of the Teacher. I'm your host, Jacob Montag. This is a continuation of our Culture Builders series. We're currently discussing the mindset of a successful educator with my good friend Jonathan Sixtos. If you missed any of our previous parts, be sure to check the links below, and then I'll take you to the previous videos. I would highly encourage you to watch them in order. We're doing these in 10 to 15 minute increments for your viewing and listening convenience. So, we hope that this series will be a blessing to you, will be an inspiration to you. Share it with a colleague who's really down right now. Share it with an instructional leader on your campus, because ultimately we hope that this series will put us all in a better frame of mindset wherever we are conducting our respective educational journeys at. So sit back, relax, and let's get ready to continue our upcoming conversation about what it takes to be a successful teacher, entitled Culture Builders. So when it comes to creativity and lesson planning, and we just talked about meeting the standards, what is the style of instruction of East High School, especially within the English department? Like there's the debate. I personally switched from being the behaviorist, lecture, drill and kill type teacher to more of a problem-based or project-based learning style a couple of years ago. So what's the style of East these days?
I think that especially in the English department, we have a menagerie of styles. We have somebody a couple doors down who is the strict behaviorist, and he's really great about enforcing, the one-way hall directions and making sure everyone follows dress code and everything. And then we have some people who are a little more exploratory, a little more, like you said, project-based, and maybe motivate the kids more through a relationship of saying, hey, we're on the same team. Now, obviously I'm team captain, we're not buddies, we're not friends. Don't look for me on Facebook, but we have a varying of styles in the department. So much so that I think it's great that a kid through the 4 years of English should experience the different styles. We don't want them to have the same teacher all 4 years or only experience that one style. So I would say, again, just like the state standards, we have our rules and nobody goes to the restroom first 10 minutes, last 10 minutes. We post our objectives on the board, and we all have these boundaries that we keep, but we are free to express ourselves within those spaces.
Right. And so let's dive into that a little bit here. Teaching within a team. Texas is a big state. You have a lot of rural areas where somebody might be the only English teacher for 9th through 12th grade, or you might have that teacher that teaches across the board, like what you're doing this year. And you might have some that they are all English 2 or English 4. Whenever you're working with the team, especially when you're working with a multiplicity of teams, what are some steps that you can take and instructional leadership can take to build community with the teams?
I think one of the best things that you can do is to view your teammates as accomplices and not adversaries. We can't cling too tightly to our pet projects and say, well, we've always taught Romeo and Juliet and we're always going to teach Romeo and Juliet, which for the record, I think we always should teach Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
But if you're looking at ancillary materials or different things that you bring into the lessons, then we need to appreciate someone else's perspective, because we can't know everything and we can't think of everything. And it's always good to just have somebody to bounce off of as far as ideas and creativity, or even have someone to push back and maybe point out some things that you hadn't noticed before. Like, oh yeah, well, I hadn't thought of that. How can we work together to fix these problems? In the same way that we approach our students and say, hey, we're on the same team. Let's work together to meet this goal. We should take that same attitude into our professional learning communities.
Right. And I think that's such a great point to make, because there might be somebody watching here that their school doesn't do that. Like we've been doing this the same way for 15 years. We have 15 years. You have 15 minutes. So why should we value your opinion? So just real quickly, what would you say to a first year teacher that's kind of maybe in that less of a giving environment?
I would say to a first year teacher, one of the first things that you need to establish and you need to nail down is your own identity. And with that comes acknowledging your own limits. Like we've been mentioning boundaries before. Know what you're good at and know that, hey, this is what I can fall back on in case of emergency. But also understand that you're not going to learn everything in the first year. My first year teaching back in 2013, I must have given like 50 to 75 detentions just in the first semester alone. And now I think this year I've given maybe 3, and we're about
Right.
halfway through, because my style back then was I need to exude control and to know that I'm in control. Whereas now, a 10-year evolution of a teacher, I win the kids over with excitement and say, hey, when you come into this classroom, the bass is bumping, I'm bouncing around, there's probably a coffee in my hand or water. It's very important for new teachers to stay hydrated, but they can see that I'm passionate about what we're going to talk about. And I bring things in. I use a classroom messaging service, and I say, hey, I was thinking about you guys when I read this article. This applies to what we were talking about in class. Send me things that remind you of what we're going through. And through those connections, the kids see, oh, okay, it's not so much about stop talking, Billy, because I'm talking, but it's, hey, Billy, I need you to come back because we are exploring. So for a new teacher, if you are unsure about where to go, just know that the kids will smell inauthenticity a mile away. So just be
Oh, yeah.
yourself. Figure out what is your style and let them know this is my style. You say, hey, we're going to do a couple days of vocabulary, but we'll get to some fun activities in a while, because the kids mainly crave consistency. I mean, very few kids will crave your content. You know, maybe they're a kid like me. I love science. Let's learn science. But they're going to crave consistency over content.
Right. Because that school might be the only consistent part of their day.
Very true.
Yeah. It's with that being said, let's kind of pivot a little bit here. What are some things that you do? You just got your new roster. You looked in whatever learning management system you have, and you're like, okay, I've got, oh dear Lord, I've got this many SPED kids. I've got this many 504 kids. Oh, I remember that child. So like, how do you prep yourself for years where one, the roster may not look so ideal? You're teaching a new content. You know, it doesn't look on paper. On paper, that should be like the worst year you've ever had.
I would say I have to go in aware of the struggles. I'm in no way an idealist. I know that there's going to be budget cuts. I know there's going to be schedule crunch. I know there's going to be a fire drill on the day I plan my most exciting lesson. And I developed a few years ago, it's not like anything special. I'm not going to bottle it up and sell it in a book, but this concept of an emotional budget. Obviously, you know, there's people out there trumpeting Dave Ramsey and all this stuff about budgeting. And they say, you know, don't spend more than you have. But we work in an industry and a system that asks us consistently to give more than we have emotionally. So maybe you think, oh, well, teachers, you know, they kind of stay in their same 20 by 20 space most of the day. You're not out running a marathon. But we have decision fatigue. And we are, especially if you're an empathetic teacher, pouring out emotionally to these kids and building relationships with them. And they have their ups and downs. And psychologically, that affects us as well. And so a few years back, I had this concept of I am going to map this out and say, I'm willing to give this much and no more. And going in with that boundary set, then I didn't feel like I was letting the kids down. Well, how come you can't come to our game tonight, Mr. Sixtos? Because I've made a decision that my body needs to rest this Friday night, or I have a gym routine, or I have something that I've scheduled with my friends, and reminding them that boundaries are healthy. Like, me not going to your game doesn't mean I don't value you. Me not going to your game means I also value myself. And I want you at a child's age to realize that and grow up knowing that you can't be everywhere all the time doing everything. And that concept of an emotional budget has really saved me from burnout. And I encourage younger teachers also, know what you're willing to give. And I mean, if you're younger, you don't have a spouse, you don't have kids, and maybe you're available to give a little more in that area. But if you're active in your church, you're active in your family, you're active in civic pursuits, you know, Lions Club or Rotary Club, things like that, it is okay not to be everywhere all the time for every kid, because we are a part of a support system. We ourselves are not the only support.